Joey Quinn knew. You can't stare that long into Dexter Morgan's eyes and not see it. The stillness. The calculated calm. The eerie composure at crime scenes that would make even the most hardened detective shift in their seat. So the question is, why didn't Quinn say anything? Why didn't he stop him? Why did he, of all people, protect him? You're not imagining things. Quinn had plenty of chances. He saw the signs. He wanted to expose Dexter. And yet, every time it counted, he backed off. And that wasn't an accident. It didn't happen overnight. In fact, Quinn's initial suspicion wasn't even about blood or bodies. It was about behavior. Dexter was off. Always had been. But while most of Miami Metro brushed it off as weird but brilliant, Quinn had that classic cop instinct. Something about Dexter didn't add up. Remember when Quinn called Dexter a freak behind his back? That wasn't just banter. That was step one in a growing list of red flags. He watched Dexter work crime scenes with surgical precision. No emotion, no reaction, nothing. Now tell me, if you were a detective and your colleague kept showing up at murder scenes looking like he'd done the murdering himself, wouldn't you raise an eyebrow too? Then Rita died. Brutally. And everything shifted. To the outside world, it was just another tragedy. Another casualty in Miami's endless stream of homicides. But for Quinn, it was personal. And it was the moment when all the quiet alarm bells in his head suddenly became deafening. He didn't have evidence, not the kind that holds up in court. But let's be honest, Dexter Morgan's connection to that scene was too close, too precise, too convenient. Rita wasn't just a victim. She was Dexter's wife. And Quinn, more than anyone else, saw how Dexter operated behind that carefully manufactured facade of grief. This wasn't just about intuition anymore. Quinn had seen Dexter's emotional absence. He'd noticed the way Dexter could turn off human reaction like a switch. No tears, no breakdowns, just cleanup. That's when Quinn started asking questions. Subtle ones. Following patterns, cross-referencing times, observing Dexter with a closer, more calculating eye. Not as a coworker, but as a suspect. But here's where it gets darker. As Quinn dug deeper, he didn't just start to suspect Dexter. He started to suspect himself, his own silence, his delays, his failure to speak up sooner. And that guilt, it wasn't theoretical. It gnawed at him. Because maybe, if he'd followed his instincts earlier, Rita would still be alive. And when guilt runs that deep, it doesn't always push you to action. Sometimes, it freezes you. Sometimes, it makes you protect the very thing that caused the damage. Because admitting the truth would mean admitting you helped cause it too. When Quinn got serious, he brought in backup, Stan Liddy. And if there's one thing Liddy didn't believe in, it was subtlety. He was a disgraced ex-cop with something to prove, and Dexter was the perfect target. Liddy didn't just follow Dexter, he bugged his car, staked him out, took pictures. If Quinn had doubts, Liddy had receipts. And Quinn, he funded the whole thing himself, out of pocket. No department support, no backup. That's how badly he wanted the truth. But then, Liddy ended up dead, stabbed, phone gone, scene cleaned, like nothing ever happened. That wasn't just suspicious, it was confirmation. And Quinn knew it. But instead of pushing forward, Quinn backed off, completely. No press, no report, no follow-up. It was as if Liddy had never existed. Why? Because that was the moment Quinn realized the truth wasn't just dangerous, it was deadly. Dexter hadn't just crossed a line, he'd erased it, and Liddy had paid the price. Quinn didn't say anything, because saying something might have made him next, or worse, might have dragged Debra into the line of fire. And if Quinn had to choose between justice and survival, he chose silence. One word, Debra. Quinn wasn't just attracted to her, he was in love, and not the casual kind. The kind that clouds judgment. The kind that makes you hesitate when you shouldn't. But Debra, she was fiercely loyal to her brother. No matter how odd Dexter acted, no matter how many red flags flew up, she defended him. Always. So how do you look that woman in the eyes and say, I think your brother might be a killer? You don't. Because if you're wrong, you destroy everything. And if you're right, you might destroy her. Quinn knew the risk. The minute he opened his mouth, the dynamic between them would shift forever. Love would turn to betrayal, and whatever they had, it'd be gone. So instead of confronting Debra, he internalized everything, ran loops in his head. What if he was seeing things that weren't there? What if he ruined her life chasing a theory? Eventually, the silence became safer than the truth. Not because Quinn was weak, but because he cared. His silence was protection, not just for Dexter, for Debra, for himself. Twisted, absolutely, but in a way, heartbreakingly human. And maybe deep down, you'd do the same. Here's where it gets interesting, because Dexter wasn't clueless. He knew. He saw the way Quinn looked at him, measured him, watched him like a man trying to solve a puzzle he almost had figured out. And Dexter? He welcomed it. In his own quiet, calculating way, he turned that suspicion into leverage. He knew Liddy wasn't working alone. He knew Quinn had set it all in motion. And more importantly, he knew exactly how to stop it without ever saying a word. What unfolded next wasn't a confrontation. It was a Cold War. Two men sharing an unspoken agreement. I won't destroy you if you don't destroy me. Dexter covered Quinn's tracks in Liddy's murder investigation, cleaned up evidence, kept things vague enough to protect himself, but just clear enough to keep Quinn safe too. And Quinn? He got the message. No blackmail, no deals, just silence. Two men, both guilty, both in too deep, and both needing the other to keep their secrets buried. It was never friendship. It wasn't trust. It was mutual survival. A twisted alliance held together by fear, guilt, and one simple rule: don't speak, don't look back. Most people missed it, but if you look closely, it's one of the darkest dynamics in the entire show. Let's fast forward to one of the most uncomfortable yet revealing moments in the entire show. Debra had discovered the truth. She walked in on Dexter mid-kill. The mask was off, and everything she thought she knew about her brother shattered in seconds. And Quinn? He didn't ask questions, didn't probe, didn't confront her with the truth he likely already suspected she now carried. Why? Because by then, the truth wasn't just dangerous, it was radioactive. Debra was unraveling, emotionally wrecked, morally torn. And Quinn? He wasn't much better. He was dealing with his own guilt, his own regrets, his own quiet acceptance of everything he'd once wanted to expose. So he said nothing. Not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much. He'd already failed her once, when Rita died, when Liddy died, when he stayed silent. So now he stayed silent again. But this time, not out of fear, out of restraint. Because maybe ripping open the truth would have done more damage than letting it rot in the dark. Maybe the most compassionate thing Quinn ever did was walk away from a conversation he couldn't bear to finish. Was it cowardice or mercy? You decide. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's survival. Now here's the twist no one really talks about, but once you see it, it changes everything. What if Quinn didn't protect Dexter purely out of guilt, or because of Debra, or even fear? What if he understood him? Quinn wasn't exactly a moral compass himself. He had a history, dark corners he never fully admitted to, connections to the Ukrainian mob, a reputation for bending the rules when it suited him. He'd taken dirty money, lied in reports. He was this close to being suspended more than once. So, when he looked at Dexter, maybe he didn't just see a threat. Maybe he saw a reflection, a version of himself with fewer limits and more control. Because Quinn knew the system. He'd seen criminals walk free. He'd watched victims go unavenged. And maybe, in Dexter, he saw someone who did what cops couldn't, deliver justice in the shadows. So when he let Dexter walk, it wasn't surrender. It was understanding, not admiration, not approval, but a quiet, reluctant recognition. You're not innocent. Neither am I. But maybe you're doing what I never could. In that sense, protecting Dexter wasn't weakness. It was Quinn's way of accepting the darkness, his and Dexter's. Here's what seals it, and it's the part most people miss. Even after everything, after Debra's tragic death, after Dexter vanished without a trace, after the fallout and the silence, Quinn never spoke up, never pushed for an investigation, never reopened the Bay Harbor butcher case, even when the evidence still whispered his name. Not once. And that isn't forgetfulness. It's not laziness. It's not even incompetence. It's a decision. A conscious, painful, and deeply human decision. Because outing Dexter wouldn't just expose a killer. It would unravel everything Quinn had barely managed to keep together. Debra's legacy, the illusion of justice at Miami Metro, his own fragile sense of peace. Imagine being the one to reveal that the woman you loved died protecting a monster. Someone you could have stopped years earlier. Could you live with that? Quinn couldn't. So he chose the lesser pain, the quieter regret. He buried the truth because digging it up would have meant destroying not just Dexter's memory, but Debra's. And in the end, protecting Dexter wasn't about Dexter at all. It was about preserving the only thing Quinn had left, a version of the story where not everything was his fault. And maybe that lie was easier to live with than the truth. So now we circle back. Why did Quinn protect Dexter? Not because he was scared, not because he was dumb, and not even because he was corrupt. He did it because he was human, flawed, guilty, in love, conflicted. And maybe he saw in Dexter the monster he was afraid to admit lived inside himself. What would you have done in Quinn's place? Would you have turned Dexter in and risked everything? Or stayed silent and lived with the consequences? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.